What's going on YouTube? We're back at it for another video, and today we've got the Belurat Tower Settlement Guide. We're going to be rolling through here. This will be part 1, as there's one portion at the back end that I'm not able to access just yet. We've got to burn away those roots with some type of fire later on, and I'll be adding to this guide in a later video coming in the future. But that being said, we're going to be starting off from the main gate cross and working our way all the way through, giving you all those tips, tricks, secrets, and tips on those bosses. With that being said, we've got more than a few things to cover, so let's get straight into it. And starting out from that Lost Grace, we'll head over to the staircase just in front of us to make our way up into the actual, I guess, castle, if you will, even though it says Tower Settlement. It seems like a massive castle in a way. But over on the left side, you'll be able to pick up some of those black fireflies, and those are going to help out with that crafting material. But then we'll be heading back to the double doors that are over here and just opening them up, as sadly enough, there's nothing on the right side. And we'll start to encounter some of the new enemies that we'll be dealing with inside of this DLC. It sure does feel good to be back inside of the Lands Between. It has been greatly awaited over the past 2 years to get some additional content for Elden Ring, and I'm more than excited to dive right back in. And yet again, we're going to be hitting every single wall trying to find any one of those secrets. But in this next room, we will have a massive amounts of those scorpions, and thankfully they are pretty easy work now that we're at a much higher level this time around. But we'll be grabbing up that revered spirit ash from that statue in the middle. This will increase our capability of leveling up our summons and their defensive capabilities, or attack and defensive capabilities, every time that we have a certain amount of them, whenever we reach that next Lost Grace, to level them up. With that being said, we move forward from here, squashing a few more of those. As you remember, we are just going to be dodge rolling into every one of those walls that seem like they may be hiding something behind them. So far, sadly enough, I have yet to find one hidden wall just yet. Over here on the right, though, we'll get some of that fireproof dried liver. Goodness. But over here on our right, we will have a scorpion hiding behind that. We will be wary of that. Thankfully enough, they are pretty easy to take down. About 3 strikes should be putting them in their place. And then we'll finally make our way directly into the Belurat Tower Settlement. We'll see a couple of their citizens and start cutting them down, as they seem to have gone into a bit of a frenzy. Maybe it's famine, maybe it's something else, maybe they've been driven mad, who knows. Everything in the Lands Between seems to be hostile, and we're going to be putting them down every time they come at us. Especially some of these bigger boys. They seem to be pretty easy these days, but there's still going to be some of those remnants of the Crucible Knight, my old arch nemesis, that still seem to hold true in this Shadow of the ERDTREE. But heading up from there, we'll find a fountain where everybody seems to be praying. One fell swoop, be able to take them down and get some of that somber smithing stone. It seems that we will be getting low to high level somber smithing stones, almost as if this area is something of a mid-game that you could go into, even though it does feel like end-game. But down here in this well, we will find one thing to grab up just quick, which is going to be that MESSMERFIRE grease. But sadly enough, we'll have a locked door, but later on, we will be able to pick up the key, and we'll be doubling back to this location. But we're just making sure that people know where this is at, and that was part of my gameplay footage, so makes it easier to make this guide in that route. But moving forward from there, we'll head over to the right after I've destroyed just about everything. Had a little bit of a frenzy moment where I had to make sure I wasn't missing anything. But over here on the right, we'll have a couple of civilians that we'll need to take out pretty quickly, and over here on the left, another one sitting down. And we'll be grabbing up some more of that MESSMERFIRE grease, which may come in handy much later on, even at the boss fight at the end of this, if you'd like to use something like that. Cutting down more of those civilians will make sure that these towns are going to be empty by the time we leave them. And for certain, any one of them that tries to cut us down, well, we're going to cut them down 10 times harder. But in this next room over here, over on our left, we'll notice a guy staring at pots for whatever reason, but behind that, we'll find ourselves a silver horn tender, which I believe is similar to, I forget the name of the other one, but effectively it's given us more runes when we kill. But up the stairs right there, we've got another Lost Grace that we'll grab up, and from the left side of that, we'll be able to cut down some civilians over here. And there'll be a door on our left. Sadly enough, it's locked for right now, but we'll get that key here shortly and then double back for it. But we'll jump over onto these rooftops over here, then jump over to a ledge on the left to jump to the next rooftop and find another one of those somber smithing stones, level 4. Moving back from that point, sadly enough, there will be no other loot on these rooftops over here, but we need to get to the rooftops over on the left-hand side, so we'll be jumping back over to the walkway we just came from, jumping over the ledge and onto the next rooftops. And just over here, it won't be the most exciting loot, but it's another silver horn tender that we'll be grabbing up over here. And we'll be doubling back towards that same location and going to the left from where we came from. And yet again, that seemed like another one of those moments where we were possibly going to have a hidden pathway, but here comes old Frustrating. You know him, you love him, you hate him, just like me, that old Crucible Knight. New rendition of him. He's definitely still just as irritating as he was before, but he won't be able to block this time. Dual wielding, and he is swinging away. For whatever reason, these new Crucible Knight types are really good at covering some large amount of ground just to get back into your face, and it is quite frustrating, but thankfully, if you're able to actually dodge their moves, which seem to be telegraphed quite well, you'll be able to make quick work out of them, just like that one, but they still can hit hard as a truck. But heading back over into this courtyard over here, we will have a NPC invasion, I believe. I believe this is an NPC invasion because we do end up getting some talisman out of the end of it, which is going to be the Crusade Insignia, which raises our attack power after defeating an enemy. I'd imagine this will be good for certain zones later on that may be full of enemies out there, but hopefully that was an NPC, otherwise that was one of the worst players inside of Elden Ring trying to face off with me. I know I've already had one guy actually try to come up against me, or at least invade my game, and that did not go well for him. But over here behind the tree, we'll get the Ash of War, Shriek of Sorrow. I believe it's just going to be another one of those shouts that may have a 360-degree radius. But before we head outside of this courtyard, we'll need to go up this rubble, and we'll be grabbing up some arrows from up top here. And then we'll be heading back down and then back the way that we came, right where that Crucible Knight was, and starting to continue on. And just behind this wall, we'll have more than a few of those civilians waiting behind those corners, pretty much just trying to get the change in our purse or something, I suppose. They're really waiting on anything and everything, just to possibly have a come up. And then we'll see some of those new enemy types we'll be dealing with soon that are quite frustrating, those fly people. Reminds me of the Fly, but a worse version of it. I almost prefer that 80s movie compared to this rendition, as these are very, very irritating to deal with. But if you haven't seen the movie, I'd highly suggest kind of going a one-to-one to the ending transformation scene. They almost look very similar. But over here on the left up that ladder, we'll actually get the storeroom key, and this is going to be for that locked door that we just passed back at that last Lost Grace over to the left. So we'll be doubling back to that a little bit later on. We're not going to jump to that location just yet. We've got another thing to grab over here down at the left. We've got another one of those bigger boys to deal with, a couple of throwing knives, but just before we start going back up the ladder, we need to jump over here on top of this side roof over here, and it may be a little bit difficult in certain portions. You may just want to go up the staircase to jump onto this, but we'll be able to jump over to the left into this little walkway, and this is where we'll end up getting the well depths key, which is going to give us the capability of unlocking that gate down there in that well that we had just passed earlier in the video. We'll be doubling back to those locations after we've gone through a little bit forward with getting the Lost Graces, and then doubling back so that way we can teleport to each of these locations and make it a much more cohesive guide. Now, going up from the staircase, we'll have to head left and then immediately take another left in order to open up a shortcut that may end up saving you quite a bit of time. What we'll do is hit the lift down here, open up this gate, and then be able to just access the first Lost Grace that we had originally. This way we can kind of bypass all of those enemies if we end up dying and just make it a nice little shortcut to be able to push forward, which I wish I had found this before, as I had many times ran through in a different location. But after coming back up, we'll head over to the left towards this broken down debris over here, and just behind it we will find a secret passage towards the back, which will be filled with some of those flying creatures that are quite annoying, so do be ready for that. They'll be all over the place, more than a few of them, and they can be something that can get a little bit troublesome when there's too many of them. And just beyond that, we'll find another one of those crosses with one of the most valuable things, which is going to be the SCADUTREE fragment. These are going to be what powers us up throughout this entire expansion, giving us a power up to our attack and our defense, which is going to be huge for us. But just beyond that, on our left is going to be another talisman, the Dried Bouquet. This one is going to give us a raise to our attack power when summoned spirits die. This may be pretty decent for some of those spellcasters out there. I'd imagine that would be something that could end up benefiting your spells overall. I don't know whether or not in a huge way, as I'm not a spellcaster, but it may be worth your time. But heading out from that debris and heading to our left, you may have noticed there was a doorway on the right. We'll be getting to that location here in a moment, as there is a way to make it a little bit easier to deal with the enemies that are in there by going up towards this other location over here. But we'll have a couple of those birds to deal with, along with one of those somber smithing stones on our right, level 3. And over here on our left, we've got a guy with a pot that ends up giving us a golden horn tender, giving us a little bit more of those capabilities of increasing our rune production. And yet again, we've got another one of those variations of the frustrating Crucible Knight. Now this one is much more irritating to me. He seems to cover large portions of ground pretty quickly, and they are just up in your face on this one. These guys are just hyper aggressive. Now they're not exactly the fastest attackers. You will notice this with some bosses in the coming future. They do seem to have almost what seems like an unstoppable flurry of different combos that are coming at you, but for the most part, from what I can gather, which I wasn't doing right here, your best bet is to actually try to basically counter that hyper aggression or possibly have summons to aggro these enemies. But the number one thing is to literally just jump behind them, try to dodge to the left or the right of some of those swings, and you should have plenty of time to get your own swing in by that moment before they're actually just able to swing their next round, and then be able to just keep doing that, basically dance in a circle around them. But from that location, we'll drop down to where I died before, where there's quite a few of these flies, as this will actually come back around to the top portion where that little bridge was at. But we'll grab up a couple of key items down here that may not be the most beneficial to you, but there are a bit of crafting material and things that could end up benefiting you in the future, as well as a broken rune over here, which isn't much, but overall, it's a couple of runes, it's a couple of things that could end up benefiting you in the long run, especially if you're into crafting some of those pots for the coming future. But over here on our right, we'll have a couple of bigger boys to deal with, crush those down pretty quickly, and then head back over to this left portion, which will be right where the edge of that bridge is going to be, and then we'll be pushing forward from this sector. And we'll have a couple of those bigger boys to deal with. Slice those down, get those civilians in line. Over here on our left, we will grab up another one of those black pyre flies. Firefly, goodness. If I could just spit that out properly. A couple more of those civilians to keep in check. We're going to be making it through in this Belurat, or Belurat, however you'd like to say it. And we're going to be putting the law and order down here, Reaper style. Over here on our left, we've got another one of those revered spirit ashes, which is going to increase the power of our summons, their attack and defense, as soon as we have at least one or possibly two of them every time that we hit one of those lost graces. So keep in mind that it will let you know when you're at a lost grace whether or not you have an available upgrade. So keep an eye out for that. You definitely want to have that. Now in the staircase, we'll head over to the left up the staircase first, and we'll notice a stubby armed circular blade holding guy. He's got much longer everything other than his arms. They're very stubby compared to him, which is strange. But after you've defeated him, up here at the very top we'll get the lost grace, and next to us is the boss room, but we're not going to head in just yet. We're going to make sure that we head back down the staircase and then eliminate some of these enemies, or at least give you the capability of eliminating them with throwable items before dropping down, as one of them can be a little bit irritating. We'll deal with stubby arm over here yet again, and then just head on down here. Now we will grab up one item right here, which is going to be, I believe, a somber smithing stone. Let's check it again. Yeah, it's going to be a level 1, but you'll notice those scorpions hanging over there. You could take this moment to basically cut them down, as one of them is going to be a bit tougher, the one in front of us, or you can drop down right here for a little bit of a cost to your health. But in general, it could be a lot easier done if you're somebody that just wants to use some mage spells or something, especially in this tightly packed room. If they're just jumping around on you, that can be a tough time for somebody that's a ranged player. So that might have been the better angle for you. But for somebody like me, you know, it's just, let's just get aggro in the face of it. But right here we'll get the bone bow, which doesn't seem too special. It's all about strength and dex. It's something I could possibly use, but I'm not a bow player, so I don't know whether or not the Rancor shot on that or what have you is actually going to be that powerful. But let me know down in the comments below if you know this is actually worthwhile. Now let's get into the boss fight itself, the Divine Beast Dancing Lion. This guy is not the hardest so far that I've faced off with the bosses, but he can still be a frustrating time. He is definitely one that is hyper aggressive, big. He's going to create certain moments where he's going to push you into a corner, and it's going to be really irritating to deal with that camera lock on. And he's got a couple of moves that have some definite AoE or possibly stagger power, and by the time you get him to half health, you'll be playing around with a rotation of different elemental strikes that he'll have. Beginning with the lightning strike, he'll be able to throw lightning, creating an AoE lightning on the ground. He'll have charges of lightning coming up. He'll also be able to spit lightning in a circle around him, which in those moments when he spits things around him, you do want to be as close as possible, but there's still some BS moments where it may still end up hitting you. But after that, he's also got the wind ability, which he'll be able to tail whip some wind or create a giant tornado. Giant tornado, I would highly suggest just running to the side, trying to dodge that one. Makes it a little bit easier. And then the most frustrating one to me is the Frostburn one, which this one for me is counterproductive to my kind of hyper-aggressive melee style. Every time that he strikes, he is going to create this AoE on the ground that's going to be that frostburn, constantly causing that buildup. On top of that, he does have the capability of doing a ground stomp for a larger AoE radius of that actual frostburn, as well as being able to spit out what seems like a tornado version of the frost itself. It can be quite frustrating. But let's go ahead and take it from the top and give you every bit of the tips you need to get as hyper aggressive with this guy and just take him down as quickly as possible. When it comes to the beginning portion, every time that he strikes forward, you're actually going to want to dodge towards him and under him. You want to make sure every time he's doing some of those spinny moves, you're not getting caught up by those moments. You want to get up under him and get to that back end where that armor is, or the mid portion of his body. Try to get those strikes in as much as possible. If you're a melee player, you really want to try to break that poise as quickly as possible. That's going to be your biggest benefit in this fight. And anytime that he goes up on those two legs as high as he possibly can, again, it's another one of those moments, dodge roll up and under. We want to make sure we're constantly doing this, and we'll use this tactic even through the rotation of his different elements. Now you notice I've had a couple of oopsie moments right here. There are a couple of his combos that end with him just doing a small one circle of that spit or gas cloud that he spits out, and every single time it always seems to just catch up with me. Thankfully it's not too damaging, and in a lot of those moments you will be able to dodge roll under him and be able to get that health pot off. I'm doing a little bit of an oopsie moment here where I'm trying to heal at the very wrong time, whereas I should be going and waiting for that moment when I'm at the tail end of him to actually get that heal in, or in between some of his strikes like this. But thankfully, we've got more than a few health pots, but anytime he does the transition, that is an opportune moment to try and get one strike in, as he won't be able to attack until he's fully done his little flip move. But this is another one of those moments where we're trying to just get in and be as hyper aggressive as possible. We're trying to make sure he doesn't make it to that frostburn moment. We want to break that poise. We want to make sure that we're getting as much damage in as possible. Now, once we do break his poise, we will have to lock onto him again. Yet again, this is another mistake that I made here. I should have immediately locked onto him, and it would have been a bigger benefit to me had I done that previously. But thankfully, we were able to lock on after a short period of time and then get close enough to be able to get in a few more strikes. We'd already done enough damage by this point, and yet again, we find that giant tornado. We're running to the side, and then we're going to start pushing in. Thankfully, we're able to dodge the tail whip wind strikes pretty easily, but this is another one of those moments where the final portions of it are all about just being able to dodge roll underneath some of his attacks and try to avoid those moments when he looks like that dog that's trying to protect his food when you're getting a little bit too close, or just doesn't realize they have a tail and starts to bite backwards. But thankfully, after beating him, we will get the Divine Beast Head, which is a helmet for melee players, considering we will get strength and dexterity increase from this helmet, or just wearing this helmet. And then from that point, we'll be able to grab up that Lost Grace, and hopefully those tips kind of helped you out. It's definitely not the easiest one, but it's all about just nailing the dodges that are going underneath him and just understanding that combo. The rest of the elemental damage moments are basically just a tie-in from those points where you'll be able to just dodge roll underneath him. It just makes it a little bit more difficult in certain aspects, especially when you see that lightning charging up from the ground. A little bit irritating in those moments. But heading up from this location, we will get that Revered Spirit Ash, and we'll also be getting a note up top here that is going to give us basically a little bit of information telling us we need to go and find some way to be able to burn the path forward to make it through Miquella's voyage or journey, which everybody says it's kind Miquella, but I don't know whether or not this is actually going to be true. But this is going to be the portion that we'll be covering in a different video later on, and from this point we'll go back to the small private altar Lost Grace and then head back over to the left and be able to open up what's now the storeroom, which will also have a balcony attached to it that doesn't have anything just yet. I'd imagine this was possibly going to connect to maybe a late or end-game portion of the DLC, if not possibly some other type of side quest. But if you talk to the lady in there, you'll have to do a couple of dialogues, and then you'll get the spell Wrathful Spirit from her. Now from this point, we'll just start walking on out of here, and then we'll have to just jump back down into the alleyway just in front of us to make it over to the well. So we'll just jump over the ledge, jump onto the rooftop, jump on down. Now I went a little bit of a strange path. You can just do the direct route where you just go down the middle of the street, And then over on our left, we'll have to climb back down that well. And now that we have the well depths key, we'll be able to just unlock this portion. And now we find out that there is a river of poison. We knew this was coming apparently from some details that we had seen before this DLC launched. And it's not as painful as the Scarlet Rot Lakes, but it's still something to trudge through. But thankfully, there is more than enough ground for us to kind of jump on top of. And sadly enough, there is nothing over on some of these rooftops over here. I'm just using this to make sure that I didn't have too many cuts that ended up making it not connect properly so you wouldn't get thrown off. But over here on this smaller rooftop over on our left, we will get a, smithing stone level 2, not a somber one. And then just beyond some of this debris over here, we'll find an old friend that we used to fight with many different times. Thankfully, with a bigger playing field that doesn't seem so claustrophobic as some of the other zones that we may have fought this thing with. But your best bet with fighting with this creature is going to be just going up to the back end of it, or at least just behind its arms to get some of those swings in. You're really just kind of avoiding the tail whip at this point, or the massive explosion he causes. As soon as you start to see him kind of leak some of that yellow smoke out of the sides of him, you'll know he's about to actually blow up in a radius around him, so you just need to dodge back in that moment. And anytime he gets a little bit squirrely, you'll notice he's just trying to do that tail whip in those moments. But it shouldn't be too hard to be able to just kind of stick underneath his side and avoid those arms and just be able to just keep nailing him over and over. It won't take you too long, and by the time you finish him off, we've got the immunizing horn charm +2, so this is going to be something that just benefits us in the long run with having a bit more of that immunity when it comes to dealing with some of these, as who knows, this may not be the only time we'll be dealing with large lakes of poison in the coming future. And there'll be a couple of items to grab up over here, including that smithing stone back there, and then just avoid the poison as much as possible. Thankfully, we do have a good bit of ground to stand on and intermediate ground in between different structures in order to maintain the capability of not being fully poisoned. But going over into the left portion, we'll be hugging the left side real quick, as there is one item we'll need to grab up over here over these rooftops, which is going to be the neutralizing boluses. These are going to help us with alleviating the poison once its maximum effect is achieved and starting to actually dwindle at our health or our stamina. But going into this left zone over here, we're going to be hugging the right side as we're going to try and make the shortcut, as there is a ton of flies over here. And before we take the ladder up, over here on the left side, we'll be grabbing up one more item, which is going to be some of those mushroom crafting material. And then we're going to head up over to the ladder over here. That way we can open up the shortcut to that very first Lost Grace. That way we don't have to keep going through that well in order to make it back to this zone over here, just in case we do die, as there is one miniature boss unit over here we'll be taking on, as well as a ton of those fly creatures that are out here in this lake of poison. Now over here, we'll need to just start cleaning out some of those bugs, or those flies if you will. They are roving in packs all the way through here, and there's more than a few of them. I would highly suggest taking these out before you end up taking on the mini boss over here that we have, or just the regular Crucible Knight that has a little bit of an Ash of War attached to his weapons that may be a little bit more difficult than the regular one. But overall, it shouldn't be too hard as long as you're constantly dodging forward, trying to avoid some of those swings, and then just getting some of those back shots on him. You should be taking him down pretty quickly. And you'll get the Horned Warrior's Sword for defeating him, which is going to have a little bit of that faith damage attributing to its actual overall output. So for some of those faith builds, along with the Horn Calling, it should be fairly decent for you. But over on to our left, after we've taken out some of these flies, which are pesky as real life ones, I'll tell you right now, we've got another fist weapon over here, which is going to be the Poisoned Hand, which seems pretty interesting. It's got Poison Spear Hand Strike attached to it. I would not mind using this in the coming future for a little bit of a fun build with just fist weapons, and then just using the arcane ability with that at the same time, just striking poison into all of my enemies. But over to the right, we will have one more building to jump on top of for our last bit of loot for this entire area, and it's going to be covered in some of those flies, so do be careful. We've got more than a few of them to deal with, and then we'll jump over to the left side to get some of those serpent arrows. And that's going to conclude the entire area guide of the Belurat or Belurat Tower, whatever what was the name of this? Settlement Tower? Tower Settlement? It's a castle. It might as well be considered one. But that's all the loots and secrets out there for it right now, up until we possibly get that portion at the back end that may just end up being a boss fight. I don't know whether or not it's actually going to open up anything more, but I know this is everything from this area for right now and all the loot that you can access for this time being. If there's any side quests attributed to this, I'll start doing some miniature guides just for those side quests specifically in order to connect back to this. So it should be pretty helpful to just have this area guide, or hopefully it has been helpful for you, along with some of those tips for the boss fight itself and moving through the area. But in general, we're going to be doing a ton of these area guides, so hit that subscribe button if you'd like to see more of this content. Hopefully it's helped you out. Let me know it in the comments below if there's anything that I have possibly missed within this, and let some of those other people out there have that information to expand on their overall playthrough, as well as searching through some of these to just help out the community in general. But if you'd like to see some of this content live, hit that link down in the description below. Follow me over at Twitch. We'll be streaming daily. We've got plenty of that Elden Ring content coming in the future. We're going to be rolling out with a lot of these, and I'm going to be trying to do as much as I possibly can with it, as quickly as I possibly can. But trying to make that quality over quantity is going to be the thing that eats up a lot of the time. But hopefully you've enjoyed this, and have a good one.